information from?
Perversion. I mean,
Purity and virgins.
I have a virgin locked in the closet, and I give her essence of Gelfling on occasion. And on when she's on this essence of Gelfling, that's really, by the way, really hard to obtain. But I made a deal with some underground factions, shall we say, to produce this. And what happens is when I give her this, she spits out babble, and I translate it, and it becomes the comic.
Yeah. No, really, the information. It is important.
Where is the information actually coming from?
Yes.
I've already covered it in another interview that I've done on the computer, actually.
But this is past life information that I've been recovering slowly for 14 years. According to the spirits, I need not touch any historical tomes or anything until I was ready. So I started reading the historical stuff and doing my biblical and other research then. And so it's just really cool that everything I had already remembered was in there.
That it's based on a story that's always been in my head. And some people would call it past life information. I tend to, but I was raised to believe in past lives. And actually, past life recovery is one of my specialties in my spiritual life. I have interpreted a lot of this past life information into a science fiction. When I was younger, I didn't do that, but nowadays I do. And that could be for any reason, because I watch a lot of sci-fi, because my parents were Star Trek buffs, because of them. And, when I was, a lot of the stories actually from when I was growing up, because I always had the story in my head. And when I was 4, before I even started elementary school, I lived all in a wooded area with a dirt road, and I would take a stick and go out to the road and draw the comic and tell myself the story. The part of the story that I told back then is not the part that's being covered now. The main character, Taos, I covered her life as a teenager and what it was like for her on her first job and how unhappy she was. And it was things that I just knew when I was 4 years old. And I would actually draw detailed pictures of wing structure and how the wings were built and how you got them and what the colors on the wings meant, and a lot of information that I don't even cover in the comic now because it's just not necessary to cover these things. But I always knew not to read certain things, and my father even forbade me from reading a couple of books until I had my information more complete and formed on my own. So I was careful of a lot of shows and a lot of history stuff. And then whenever I felt confident in what was in my head, then I cracked open the Book of Enoch. And then and only then did I start reading the Bhagavatam. And lo and behold, there were things in there that aren't talked about in mainstream stories that had been in my head.
So, you know, I understand the spirits made me wait so that when I did find the stuff, I wouldn't doubt myself. See, that's why you're supposed to wait. But too many people, they rush ahead and they look first and then go, I think I was there. I'm pretty sure I was there because I honest to God, this chick I knew, it was, I want to tell you a secret. Lucifer rescued me out of hell.
Especially the weapon of foam, which is a weapon that may or may not get covered in the comic. I don't know if I'm going to get to slip it in. But it was there. Mm-hmm. So, past life information, Black Ops, Men in Black, Men in Pink, I don't know. It was just something that's always been in my head. So.
So then I find the Hindu text, and that's why I stayed up. I was up for like 2.5 days without sleep, going through this Hindu text. Kept poking Rebecca, wake up, I'm going to tell you this. Wake up. And she wouldn't get up, so then I'd go into Choshi's room, Choshu! And she'd go, ah! So both of them didn't have hardly any good, decent sleep while I was going through the Hindu text. And then whenever I found that part about the sea foam, so whenever I came across that, because most people say, well, you made up that weapon, but then I found it in the actual text. That was really, really fucking cool. The Hindu text called it a weapon that's neither wet nor dry. It's a genocide. It's kind of like roachicide, but for angels. Yeah, and basically you just coat the area with it, and it puts out a noxious gas. No, I don't mean seafoam in the water. Have you watched seafoam when it bunches up on the sand? It bunches up in clumps.
But Akashik was meant to be very serious, and one personality quirk about myself is that the more silly I get, the more serious I really am inside. So, this comic is a very, very, very extremely serious matter, which is why it's such a silly comedy. So yeah, that's where the information comes from, though.
Because you can actually slip in a lot of information when you're
People
being,
pay attention when you're laughing.
being silly. Yeah.
And it's easier. Sometimes it's just easier to cope with stuff, which is a trick my grandmother taught me. Another place that a lot of the information comes from is from UFOlogy, because it's just really interesting to be talking to some people in the park one day and remark, you know, the air underneath the beam ships is really, really heavy and thick, and you can actually grab it, and it's thicker than pea soup. And they say, yeah, it is. And then you realize, wait a minute, I just randomly remembered something that you're not going to find in a movie, and you're not going to find on the internet just randomly because it's such a specific, unique piece of information. And then you sit down and do some research, and others have said the exact same thing. That the energy affects the air underneath a spaceship, and it gets thick and heavy there. So the information comes from a lot of strange spiritual sources, and when you're as spiritual as I am, traditionally, I would have been given my own little teepee. Well, actually, would have been a lodge with my tribe. We didn't have teepees. My own lodge, and I would have been very well cared for because I would have been the spiritual leader. Not necessarily like a prophet, but shamans are born and only rarely made, and you don't have that luxury in mainstream American society. So I have turned my spirituality into a job because damned if I'm going to go under without a fight, and I'm smart, and I'm also creative, and the biggest powerful thing that people of our persuasion as spiritual people have is our power to tell stories. So I will tell stories. I have had influence in my life from Marion Zimmer Bradley, believe it or not, and a couple other people. When I look back, I think Emmett Caffrey and Marion Zimmer Bradley were my biggest influences growing up. Emmett Caffrey I never met personally. We only exchanged 2 mails. She wouldn't know me from a hill of beans. But Pern was a really large part of my life, and you could actually look at the structure of the stories and see where I subconsciously imitate her. Marion Zimmer Bradley and I actually exchanged a lot of letters. She and I never met in the flesh. We were not like best friends. But she would take my stories and my submissions and edit them for me and send them back with suggestions. She was basically a long-distance mentor. I think that there are a lot of writers and people that were touched by her that miss her. She was definitely one of the very few spirits in the world that was able to cling to the ethic of helping others get on their feet and learn, that started to die in the late 80s, early 90s, and a lot of people stopped putting out energy and went and sent back editings and stuff, and she continued up until her death. I had sent her some things before she died. I didn't know she was sick, and she's found a way to get it back to me. She got her assistant editor, I guess it was her assistant editor. I'm not sure the woman's role, but the woman, through her, sent stuff back. Marion Zimmer Bradley was a really fantastic person as far as I know. But anyway, that's not Akashik, that's Marion Zimmer Bradley. Moving on. It's not. The faucet's dried up. It's Rebecca's fault.
Just so that you know, she is also working on